A janitor dies in a small town in Vermont. Nobody comes to the funeral in a suit. Nobody expects much from the estate. Then the lawyers open his accounts. $2.3 million. No inheritance. No side business. No lucky bet. The man never earned more than $12 an hour in his entire life. And somewhere right now, at this exact moment, a woman earning 4 times his salary just overdrafted her checking account for the second time this month. Same country, same economy, same banks, opposite outcomes. And the reason has nothing to do with money. The janitor's name was Ronald Read, Brattleboro, Vermont, gas station attendant for 25 years. Then a janitor at JCPenney for another 17. The kind of man you'd walk past without a second glance. Now, let me introduce you to someone else. She doesn't have a name because she's 11 million people. She's a composite of the average American earner. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah is 34. She earns $58,000 a year, nearly 5 times what Ronald Read ever made. She has a 401k through her employer. She's read 2 books about personal finance. She downloaded a budgeting app in January. She deleted it by March. Right now, Sarah has $4,200 in total savings. She feels a low hum of financial anxiety almost every day, loudest on Sunday nights, when Monday reminds her that her paycheck is already spent before it arrives. Sarah is not irresponsible. Sarah is not unintelligent. Sarah is losing a war she doesn't know she's fighting. And Ronald Read, a man with a fraction of her income, a fraction of her education, a fraction of her access to financial tools, won that same war decisively, because the battlefield was never the bank account, it was the brain. 1979, a cramped university office in Jerusalem. 2 psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, are staring at experimental data that will eventually earn a Nobel Prize. Their discovery is devastatingly simple. Losing something hurts roughly twice as much as gaining the same thing feels good. Find a $100 bill on the sidewalk? Pleasant. A small rush. You tell a friend, maybe buy lunch. Lose a $100 bill from your wallet? Your stomach drops. You replay it for days. You check empty pockets you've already checked 3 times. Same $100. Wildly different emotional weight. They called it loss aversion. And it is quietly destroying more American wealth than any recession, any market crash, any economic policy ever could. Here's what it looks like inside Sarah's life. It's a Friday, payday. Sarah opens her banking app and sees $2,740 hit her checking account. She thinks about transferring $300 into savings. She knows she should. She's told herself she would. But something tightens in her chest because her brain doesn't register that $300 as saving. It registers it as losing. $300 she can't use for the concert next week, for the boot she's been eyeing, for the dinner her friends are planning on Saturday. She compromises, transfers $50, feels vaguely guilty, closes the app. By Tuesday, the $50 is back in checking. She needed gas, the dog needed food, and the cycle resets. This isn't a willpower failure. This is architecture. Sarah's brain is functioning exactly as evolution designed it, prioritizing immediate, certain rewards over distant, abstract ones. The dinner is real. The concert is tonight. Retirement is a ghost standing 40 years in the future, and the brain does not take ghosts seriously. Every financial guru who tells Sarah to just be more disciplined is asking her to override 200,000 years of neurological programming through sheer determination. It doesn't work. The data proves it doesn't work. The 78% of 6-figure earners living paycheck to paycheck proves it doesn't work. So what did Ronald Read do differently? He didn't fight his brain. He became someone else inside of it. Psychologists call it identity-based behavior change. And it is the single most underutilized force in personal finance. Here's the difference. Sarah says, I want to save more money. That's a goal. Goals live outside you. Goals depend on motivation. And motivation is a weather system. Sunny on January 1st. Gone by Valentine's Day. Ronald Read didn't have a goal. He had an identity. He didn't think, I should resist buying that. He thought, I am not someone who buys that. When you resist a purchase, you're spending willpower, a finite resource, a battery that drains every single time you use it. When a purchase simply doesn't align with who you are, there's nothing to resist. No friction, no internal negotiation, no guilt. You feel the same nothing you'd feel about not buying a surfboard if you've never once thought of yourself as a surfer. Ronald Read wasn't white-knuckling his way through life. He was simply being himself. And himself was a man who felt more satisfaction watching a stock position grow by $14 than wearing a new $50 shirt. Sarah? Sarah hasn't decided who she is yet financially, so every spending decision is an open negotiation. And in a negotiation between present pleasure and future security, the present wins almost every time. Not because Sarah is weak, because the game is rigged and nobody told her. Now, what comes next is where this story splits into something most finance channels will never show you. Because identity didn't just help Ronald Read save. It triggered a second psychological phenomenon that turned his modest savings into a self-compounding fortune, while the same phenomenon was destroying Sarah's portfolio in real time. If you're the kind of person who thinks about money differently than most people, the kind who's actually connecting these dots while watching, then you already know this channel was built for you. That's all I'll say about that. Let's keep going. Saving money is half the war. The other half is what happens after the money is saved. And this is where the gap between Ronald Read and everyone else becomes a canyon. January 2015, a small-town attorney's office in Vermont. A lawyer named Lawrence Stratner sits at a wooden desk, flipping through pages of financial statements. His hands are shaking. 95 stocks. AT&T, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Deere & Company. No options, no crypto, no speculative bets. Just the most boring, dependable, dividend-paying blue chips in America. Some of these positions he'd held for over 40 years. Stratner later told reporters he had never seen anything like it. Not from doctors, not from lawyers, not from executives, from a janitor. Meanwhile, let's check in on Sarah. It's March 2020. The market has just dropped 34% in 23 days. COVID is shutting down the world. Sarah's 401k, the one she barely looks at, just lost $9,400 in 3 weeks. She logs in, sees red everywhere. Her stomach falls through the floor. She calls her company's benefits line and moves everything, into a money market fund. Cash, safe, no more bleeding. It feels like relief. It is the most expensive decision she will ever make, because 12 months later, the S&P 500 will recover every single dollar and then surge to all-time highs. Sarah's money, sitting frozen in cash, will miss the entire rebound. That one panic phone call will cost her an estimated $42,000 in lost growth over the next decade. What happened to Sarah has a name. The endowment effect, combined with loss aversion, created a psychological emergency that demanded immediate action. She owned those stocks. They were hers. And watching them lose value triggered the same neurological alarm as watching her house catch fire. So, escape, protect. But here's the dark irony. The endowment effect, the same force that made Sarah panic sell, is what kept Ronald Read locked inside his positions for 40 years. The difference? Ronald Read only bought companies he intended to own forever. He didn't buy stocks. He bought identities. Each share of Johnson & Johnson was an investment. It was a brick in the house he was building. And you don't rip bricks out of your own house because the weather turns bad. So when 1987 hit, when the Dow dropped 22% in a single day, Read did nothing. When the dot-com bubble burst, he did nothing. When 2008 turned the global economy inside out, he did nothing. His loss aversion, the same force that devastated Sarah, was pointed in the opposite direction. Selling would mean dismantling something he'd built, and his identity wouldn't allow it. His own psychology became a fortress. Sarah's became a fire alarm, that never stopped ringing. And if you think income would have saved Sarah, consider Allen Iverson, NBA legend, career earnings, over $200 million. By 2012, court documents showed he couldn't afford a meal at TGI Fridays. Iverson's identity was built around displaying wealth. When the income stopped, the identity demanded he keep spending. So $200 million vanished like steam. Read earned maybe $300,000 in his entire working life. Iverson earned $200 million. Read died richer. The money was never the variable. The mind was. So here's where Sarah's story changes. Here's where your story changes. 3 moves. 1. Write down who you are financially today. Not a goal, not a resolution, a declaration. I am someone who builds wealth in silence. I don't trade tomorrow's freedom for today's comfort. Write it on an index card. Slide it behind your debit card in your wallet. For the first 72 hours, it will feel ridiculous, like wearing a costume. Good. That discomfort means your identity is being rewritten. Ronald Read didn't become who he was overnight. At some point, sitting in that gas station, watching snowfall on a Vermont highway, he made a decision about the kind of man he was going to be. And then 54 years of behavior simply followed. Sarah never made that decision. And without it, every financial choice she faces is an open negotiation between who she is right now and who she might become someday. Someday always loses. 2. Automate until the decision disappears. Ronald Read didn't have automatic transfers in 1965. He had to write physical checks, drive to a brokerage office, hand over cash in person. His identity had to be that strong to overcome the friction. You can set up an automatic transfer tonight that moves money into an index fund before it ever touches your checking account, before you even see it, before loss aversion gets a chance to whisper. The best financial system is one you forget exists. Like those Fidelity accounts, where the highest performing investors were literally people who had died or forgotten they had the account. Remove the decision. Remove the willpower. Let the machine be disciplined so your brain doesn't have to be. Sarah has the tools to do this right now. She's had them for years. What she hasn't had, until today, is the identity that makes setting it up feel like an act of self-expression instead of self-denial. 3. Name your accounts the way you'd name your children. Research from Duke University's Common Sense Lab found that people who gave savings accounts emotionally meaningful names, not account 3B, but my daughter's first semester or the house where we grow old, were 3 times less likely to make early withdrawals. Because pulling money from account 3B is clicking a button. Pulling money from my daughter's first semester feels like stealing from your own child. You're turning loss aversion into a security system. The same force that made Sarah panic sell in March 2020. Now it's guarding the vault door instead of blowing it open. For the first time in your financial life, the pain of losing isn't your enemy. It's your bodyguard. When they cleaned out Ronald Read's house, they found stacks of old Wall Street journals, clipped carefully, folded neatly. He'd never paid for a subscription. He read them for free at the public library and took home the ones nobody else wanted. His car was a 2007 Toyota Yaris. His clothes came from thrift stores. He donated $1.2 million to the local hospital, the same hospital that once treated him as a charity case. He donated $480,000 to the town library, the same building where he'd sat for decades, reading quietly in the afternoon light, while the world outside assumed he had nothing. Nobody knew. The nurses didn't know his name. The librarians didn't know his net worth. His neighbors thought he was barely getting by. And maybe that's the most powerful part of all. Ronald Read never needed a single person to see what he'd built. He never needed a watch to prove his worth. Never needed a car to announce his arrival. He built a $2.3 million legacy in complete silence, because his wealth was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a gift. Sarah is still writing her story. She's 34. She has time. She has tools Ronald Read never dreamed of. What she's been missing isn't information. It's identity. And the distance between her story and Ronald Read's story between her story and your story isn't talent, isn't luck, isn't income. It's a single, quiet decision about who you are, and you can make it right now. That's what we do here. We don't just talk about money. We take apart the invisible machinery inside your mind that decides, before you ever open your wallet, whether wealth builds or disappears. Next week, we're unpacking the single most expensive cognitive bias in investing. It has cost ordinary Americans an estimated $1.7 trillion over the past 20 years. And there's a 90% chance it's running inside your head right now, completely undetected. If you don't want to miss that, subscribe. That's it. Just subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.